Welcome back to the Tech Factor podcast by Purple Quarter. Today we have Ajit in the room. Thank you so much for joining us, Ajit. Thanks for coming on a Saturday, and we're happy to be at your office.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome. So just for the crowd or for the audience to know, Ajit, you've actually spent your career with corporates and startups. I think that you spent a very long stint with SAP and then moved on to Myntra. And from Myntra, you were a founding member with M-Fine, took a plunge into a startup, really small startup, and now you're at Licious. So could you tell us in a single word, if you had to define your journey, what would you say?
I'd probably use the word empowering.
Empowering. Okay. Could you tell us a little more?
Yeah, I think, so I'll use sort of 3 or 4 dimensions to explain, how it's helped me, this journey. Mm-hmm. I think first would be in the direction of innovation. Mm-hmm. So working in, big established places like in SAP and moving to startups gives you exposure to a lot of new technologies, right?
Right.
You get to work with great minds. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing. So you learn a lot. So that's one thing that I've seen, I've benefited from.
Sure.
The second dimension would be around learning, right? The business problems are quite diverse in both places, right? B2B problems tend to be more long-term. In a startup, you're looking for product market fit and you're looking for immediate results and so on. So they tend to throw up a lot of learning opportunities, and that's been good from that perspective. Mm. The third would be around leadership. You have structured leadership styles in a big established places, and you have flat hierarchies in startups. So the way you do mentorship and coaching of your people tend to be a lot different, and that's helped me a lot as well. Sure. And the fourth would be in terms of impact, right? What you do, you see immediate results. While in an established place, it would probably take you months or years to get there. Mm-hmm. In a startup, this is going to be extremely quick. So all of this have been learning for me, and I think empowerment from these 4 dimensions has been, for me, the big thing, having spent my time in both B2B setups and B2C.
Interesting. So I'm going to double tap on what you just said, right? And I think I vaguely remember Myntra was 2015 is when you got in.
That's correct.
Just 1 year after, I think they got acquired by Flipkart. So tell us, how was your journey during that time? Because if I remember it correctly, and for people who are during that period, there was a lot more focus on revenues, wasn't it? So could you talk about how this empowering technology and learning went side by side with Flipkart coming into Myntra, and what did you guys do at Myntra as well?
I think in the first 3 months, they saw sort of the momentum shift from, your desktop to mobile.
Okay.
Right? I think I joined them sometime beginning of April. Mm-hmm. And by May, almost 80% of our revenues were coming from mobile app.
Okay.
And around 90-95% of traffic, right? So I think what we saw at the point was the buyers and their preferences moving from websites to mobile, right? Mm. Mobile was a big thing. We had, 300 to 400 million subscribers on smartphones. So it was a booming, infrastructure. So, and Myntra I think we took advantage of that. Mm. Right? We shut our website, as it was famously called the app-only move.
Yeah, right.
So we focused entirely on building the best fashion experiences for Myntra, right? Mm. And that journey was absolutely, filled with learnings, surprises, all of it, sure. Right? The mobile platforms were not as robust as they are today. So there was a lot of learnings that we had to do, a lot of, I would say, learning from mistakes, trial and error, all of these things that we did. There was a focus on growth, obviously, and it happened. I think the tailwind was there with us, and us being focused on fashion gave us that, that momentum to focus and build custom experiences for fashion.
Right.
Which the horizontals like an Amazon or Flipkart were not doing. Mm. Right? And that gave us the impetus that we needed. Revenue grew. Of course, it's in those days, it was a thin margin business. Mm. Myntra luckily also had their own private labels.
Correct.
So that helped a lot.
Sure.
So a lot of innovations that we did, either on processes or on technology, sort of helped us grow in that phase.
Right.
Right. And like I said, learning all the time, right? Some innovations worked, some didn't.
Right.
But that was it. I mean, if you look at the private label called Moda Rapido, that was one of the first brands that was fully driven through data and data science.
Right.
So the brand was built entirely by algorithms and machines,
Wow.
as opposed to human
Can
designers.
you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So what happens is when you purchase something online,
Right.
What users tend to leave are signals for you.
Okay.
On what their preferences are, right? So if you wishlist a product, or you add to cart a product, or you check out something, it tells you, it tells us that you probably liked some aspects of that product. So if you break that product down into constituent attributes, like for instance, this shirt would say it's color blue, it has a collar, it has some print here which you can't see.
Okay.
And in a kind of weave and all of that, right? These are attributes that make this shirt. Now, if you see a lot of users actually adding this particular product to cart, you can sort of say that it is because of the color blue and the kind of weave and the pockets, right? For instance. So if you analyze this data over millions of users, over several months, what you can end up with is a recipe of a product that actually would be appealing for a consumer.
Wonderful.
Right? And so you sort of backtrack and reverse engineer the recipe that actually would work and that would sell. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating products that would actually sell through the best. Right? So this is fast fashion. And we dabbled around with these little things of little innovations like this.
And this was in which year?
This was 2016.
2016.
2015,
Wow.
2016. This
Wow.
is the time frame. That we did that. Now, of course, this is a thing. You see a lot of companies do this.
Talk about it, yeah.
So fast fashion was something that I wouldn't say necessarily we invented it, but I think we played around with it. There were learnings there. We used AI extensively. So yeah, those were things that you could experiment, try, fail in that short amount of time. And this is as a culture that we tend to see in a lot of startups. I mean,
Sure.
that carried on with my life at M5 and now at Licious.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I were to think of it, right, you did get to a role of a CTO while you were with Myntra. And may I call you the poster boy then of Myntra? I mean, I saw you in various forums and talking about what you were doing with Myntra. How do you take the leap of faith to go and join a startup? Especially completely different field, right? I mean, you went into a health space. This was e-commerce. So how did that shift happen? I mean, yeah.
So, I had spent 14, 15 years in B2B, with SAP. And SAP taught me a lot in terms of how do you build platforms for scale, platforms for multiple businesses. You're industry agnostic in a company like SAP, right? You build for all industries and you build a platform that can be used by everybody. So it gives you ability to think in terms of platforms and abstractions, right? However, the time to market or, the speed of innovation is not as much as what I would have personally liked.
Right.
You are always 3 or 4 steps away from the consumer.
Sure.
And by the time your innovations reach your consumers, it's probably 2 years ahead, right? I mean, consumers don't necessarily adopt at the same pace that you're building them.
Correct.
So there is that lag that you generally tend to see. So I wanted to try something which is much more immediate in terms of impact that you can create. And that's why I went to, I said, okay, startups is probably the place to do this.
Sure.
Myntra luckily happened. The shift was quite dramatic, as you can imagine. The speed of things, the way you do it, the culture of try and fail, and that's okay, is all fundamentally different from what you would experience at a in a big setup. So that was a learning process for me, and that is something that I really enjoyed as well, because business is fast. Your environment is changing so rapidly. The businesses have to adapt to that very quickly.
Right.
So startups sort of live that every day in, day out, right? We practically used to say every day is a survival game. And that sort of gives you a very different kind of energy to drive things, think of innovative solutions, drive product innovations, whatever it might be. That's something that I reveled in. So I continued that journey. Myntra was great. But then I said, maybe starting 0 to 1 would be something even more exciting.
Sure.
If you could touch a certain set of million users with a company like Myntra, then can I do maybe a 10x of that in healthcare? And that was the reason we went and built the startup. 5 years. Didn't necessarily turn out the way we imagined it.
Sure.
But I think there was
Awesome
more than enough
journey.
learning, which now I carry into my life at Licious. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, Ajit, tell us a little more, right? B2B is a completely different landscape when you compare the B2C, and you've donned both hats, right? Tech and product both. So, tell us your thinking principles. Do they change with respect to these two?
Yes, I think across any aspect of business, product, engineering, I think they tend to be different.
Okay.
But I'll call out a few things which are, I think, very, very critical. So one is UX and design. I think we should start there.
Right.
B2B platforms tend to focus a lot on efficiency of the user who is using the platform.
True.
Right? Maybe it's a CRM solution, maybe it is a finance or controlling solution or whatever else it might be, a marketing technology. You're focused on efficiency for that end user, right? So you're really looking at that. So the interfaces don't necessarily tend to be flashy and flamboyant, but they are purpose built to just fulfill that user's need.
Sure.
It tends to be exactly the opposite when it comes to a consumer.
Okay.
Right? Now you're thinking about you're not talking about power users. You're not talking about people who know what they're doing. Right? These are people who are browsing, and they could be from different target groups within in the consumer segment. So they all tend to look at your product very differently. They expect a lot of different things, and to cater to their needs, you have to create your user experiences which are very, very intuitive in nature. Right? So they tend to be extremely different, and that's one of the key aspects where you find fundamental difference in the way you approach things. The second would be the way you think of platforms.
Right.
And this is both from a product and engineering perspective. In a B2B, like I said, most setups are industry agnostic. So you are assuming or understanding a lot of different use cases across various industries, and then creating the abstraction in a way that one product would tend to fit all of these use cases.
Okay.
Right? So the levels of abstractions in platforms have to be that strong for you to create a single product that caters to any industry, whether it is CPG, whether it is retail, whether it is manufacturing. It needs to fulfill all of those needs. So the way you build extensions, the way you build modularity, all of that tends to be extremely abstract and complicated, right? While in a B2C setup, you don't have to abstract to that degree. Correct. Because you're industry specific.
Right.
Your Licious is in meat e-commerce or meat B2C.
Yeah.
Here, the way you think of platforms is, can I build it in a way that if I were to extend and expand my markets, launch new business ideas, how flexible is the technology to actually empower that?
More horizontal.
Yes. So they tend to be very specific to the domain, but giving you agility in terms of new business models that you want to deploy. Because you're all the time looking for product market fit, so which means that your directions change. So the kind of abstractions you got to build are slightly different. They don't tend to be that complicated as a B2B world, but nevertheless, you need to think of it this way, right? So this is the second aspect. The third is agility and development speed. They tend to be entirely different in these two worlds. Since you got to build across industries of all these use cases, your life cycles of developments tend to be a lot longer. So you take 6 months, to build something, or a year, and that's okay because you're building it for everybody. While they tend to be extremely short in B2C. You're talking about weeks. Or you want to launch something in a festive season. You have to hit that date no matter what. Otherwise, you miss that and you wait for another year. Right? And you don't have the luxury of time. So the way you think of agility is in days and weeks as opposed to weeks and months in a B2B setup. The last one would be the way you think of marketing and product marketing. Right? Your sales channels and marketing in B2B tend to be working with your account executives, going into enterprises and doing long-term, it's more relationship-based, return on investment and all of that. While in a B2C setup, this is going to be more SEO-led, influencer-led, specific brand marketing. You don't have a person to talk to.
Correct.
Right? You're talking to everybody.
Right.
As opposed to in this world. So they tend to be entirely different. And what you build for each of them also tend to be different because of this. So these are some of the key differences, I think, that exist.
Sure. So, let's go to one part which you spoke about. In a B2C, it's very important that you look at the design as well, because you're interacting with the customer on such a daily basis. And let's just come to today's date and time, Licious, right? So Licious interacts with a lot of customers. How do you go about building technology where you're able to collect customer feedback, you're able to retain them? So what do you do at Licious?
So again, I think the fact that we are a B2C online platform means that we have a lot of data with us. In the sense that every action that the consumer does, which is an install of an app, or he's browsing the homepage, going through the categories, making purchases, all of it is giving us valuable information about what is appealing to the user and what is not.
Right.
So this helps us build the right cohorts of customers, right? Consumers who are, more, people who eat red meat more or fish and seafood more, right? They tend to behave slightly differently when compared to, let's say, somebody who eats chicken and so on. So these,
is that right?
I think from a shopping experience point of view, let me give you an example, right?
Yeah.
Chicken, that's just one product, right? And you have multiple cuts of it, and therefore it's chicken is chicken. In fish, there are hundreds of kinds of fish.
Varieties, yeah.
Yes, right? And every ethnicity in every region, they tend to like a certain fish and not the other, and so on.
Sure.
So personalization plays a big role in the fish and seafood journey, while it might not as much in chicken, right? I mean, you might be used to a certain cut, but that's about it, right? The limited personalization versus in fish, they tend to be extremely geographically concentrated, ethnicity concentrated. So all of this matters. Two, they tend to be hit by a lot of supply constraints. Not all of this meat is available at all points in time, right? There tend to be bans in seafood, fishing, which affects the supply, which means that when a certain kind of fish is not there, then people tend to sort of substitute that with something which is similar in taste.
Sure.
Some people do it for taste, some people do it for the kind of dish you're making.
Sure.
So your substitution depends on either food backward or texture / taste backward, right? So these nuances play in that category very deeply. If you look at ready to cook, they tend to be entirely different in the end, right? It's more restaurant-like. You're selling almost finished goods, right? Finished products.
Correct.
Yes, there is a little bit of touch that you have to add, which is your own cooking in the end, which is 7 to 8 minutes, but they tend to be looked at very, very differently. So ratings and reviews that customers leave become an essential part of that category, while it is not, and so on. So these signals sort of give you a lot of insights about how consumers look at your product, what appeals to them most, why did they come there in the first place, what is causing them to drop off. And basis this, you're able to build very personalized journeys, be it in their shopping or off-shopping experiences. Somebody dropped off because probably they found the service time was not good enough.
Sure.
So when we have a better service quality, then we need to get them back onto the platform. So there is a process of reactivation of these consumers, etc., that we need to do. So these are some of the techniques that we employ on the consumer side. On the supply side, it tends to be a lot more complicated because first of all, it's a cold chain.
Right.
So right from our processing plants all the way until the consumer's doorstep, this is a 0 to 4 degree supply chain.
Oh, okay.
Right? And there is a process of taking your raw material and turning them into packaged goods. So we sell packaged food, which is not frozen, but fresh. So they're maintained at 0 to 4 to make sure that you have the longest shelf life, right? Scientifically sort of tested and proven and so on. So you operate with 3-day shelf life, for most of the products.
Wow.
Right. And 3 days shelf life across, let's say, 250 SKUs means that you got, and we distribute this using 100 dark stores in 20 cities, right? So you have 100 dark stores, you have 250 odd SKUs, and you have 3 days shelf life, and then this becomes a mathematical problem, right? How do I place which SKU at what depth in which of these hubs in order to make sure that I don't waste anything, right? It's a wastage and demand balance that you have to play, right? You can't overproduce because then you end up wasting. You can't underproduce because then you leave revenue on the table, right? So this tends to become very, very complicated to do this day in and day out. Add to this, in order to get my packets produced at my processing center today, I need to have indents placed to my vendors who are supplying the raw material almost 4 days in advance.
Wow.
So that means on a day basis, you are predicting 7 days ahead. I'm trying to figure out how many packets of mutton keema is going to sell in Indiranagar. Therefore, I need how many metric tons of mutton to arrive at my processing center, on a certain day. And imagine doing this math, right? So
you're saying there are patterns. You're able to draw patterns per specific SKUs?
Yes, you can. So the factors of consumption tend to vary based on time of day. It varies
Time of
by
day.
You see peaks.
Spikes. Okay.
It varies by day of week. So your Saturday, Sundays tend to be higher,
Sure.
and then of course because of weekend, Monday usually dips. Wednesday you see a spike again, and so on. So there's a pattern of that, and that pattern itself can vary. The peaks can change depending upon which month of year, right? And these peaks can shift up and down. Also, basis what is the population density around a certain dark store, right? So in large Hindu festivals, for instance, there will be dip in consumption in that population, but there will be, the other communities or whatever, eating. So it's pretty hard to get this nailed down precisely, but you can teach a model to learn all of this, right? And we've innovated on some machine learning models that is able to add these aspects of religious calendar fed into the model so that it is able to predict to a reasonable degree, how your product should be placed, how your demand is going to shape, right? We can do that for those products which tend to move fast because there is enough data for you to actually make the prediction. But when you have products that don't sell as fast, which is your tail products, which you still need to have in your, your selection, then it becomes hard. So your error rates tend to be a little higher. In which case you have to do something called inventory rebalancing within a city. So if I tend to see that a certain packet, which is usually a slow mover, if I have predicted a certain number of packets to be sold in a hub and it doesn't, and if I see demand in any other pocket, then I will move it, right? So there is that inventory rebalancing that has to happen constantly between my dark stores.
Wow, it's super complicated.
To make this all happen, right? And sometimes in a pure quick commerce world, when you're not dealing with fresh, these problems don't tend to exist because you have longer shelf life. Therefore, you can take bets on it selling out at some point and constrain your production in a way that you don't end up making losses. But in this category, it tends to be extremely, extremely complicated, and that's also the fun in building all of this in the right way. And I don't think there are many players in the world who do this well. And we hope to be one of those first ones to sort of master this, the last mile, mid-mile inventory placement. I think there is a lot of science in this and exciting work to be done.
Great. So Ajit, while you were speaking about it, right, there's a question that's running in my mind. You spoke about that mutton keema and that needs to be, backward integrated with these guys to say, I would need so much, right? So much of mutton to get this done. So does technology also help you with the OEMs? I mean, the ones who are actually giving you this meat, because quality becomes the most important piece for you guys, right? Because you have such a short shelf life.
Right.
Does technology play a role there as well?
Yes. So it's not necessarily technology that we build today,
right?
But there is that we build, but we do deploy technology to make this happen.
Okay.
So at a processing center level, how much of meat by category needs to arrive at a certain day for me to produce a certain number of packets.
Okay.
Right. So the purchase orders or the intents are sent out to vendors who would actually need to provide me this. Right. Now there are quality checks that are happening at the vendor sites as well. Using tech. In some cases it is visual inspection, and some cases it's biochemistry tests and so on, that ensure that the raw material produced there as well is of highest quality.
Wow.
Right. So at the site of production of livestock, this is checked. Right. So let me give you an example of farming. The kind of feed that you give to the chicken, for instance, has an impact on the quality of the end product that reaches the consumer.
Sure.
So therefore, biosecure farms, make sure the right feed, that they're rightly kept, all of it matters, right? Now, we can't say a lot of this in fishing, but fishing, generally what fishermen do is also that they tend to use chemicals to prolong shelf life.
Oh, Lord.
At the site of fishermen, when they come with trawlers, etc. We have testing kits there to make sure that none of those fish actually is procured. Right? We don't pick any of it, even if it means we leave revenue on table. That's fine. But quality remains absolutely important for us. So if chemical traces are found, then we don't pick. Right? So we do employ technology at the site of sourcing. We of course do a lot of quality checks at the time of inward into the processing centers, everything from the right temperature that it's coming in at. So if it is not at 4 degrees, then we will have to then put them into a cold room, get it down to 4 degrees, measure pH, a lot of that, and see if it satisfies our sort of criteria for it to be then sent into a production table for making the finished goods. In some cases, it is just rejected at the site, during inward. So there are a lot of cases of that as well. Every egg, for instance, is tested for float using candlelight just to make sure that there is no cracks, there is no, there is no rotten eggs, etc. When you're taking big consignments from vendors, bad actors could ship in a few rotten pieces as well, right? But we just have to make sure all of this is checked. So it is painfully hard to do this business, and technology helps in all of this. We have not necessarily gone into this world in-house to build all of this technology, but hopefully someday we will get there. And I think there's a lot of usage of AI, computer vision that I can foresee that where we can employ all of this in the near term to make this process also extremely streamlined and near perfect.
Oh, okay. So I also thought of something else, right? So I think meat, when people used to procure meat, it used to be in those black polythene covers, and Licious was the first one to come with a design even for the packaging, right? What do you have to say about that? I mean, it's changed the way that at least India looks at how we procure meat.
100%. I think shame, whatever it is associated with buying meat, nobody wants to be seen around a dirty meat store, and that still holds good even today.
Yeah, true.
The company started in 2015, but that statement is so valid even to this day. And I think Licious sort of changed that game, very fundamentally. And packaging plays a extremely key role in that. But not just that. To preserve our shelf life, you need this. So there is a lot of innovation in that packaging as well.
Okay, say how?
So it's vacuum sealed, for instance, right? And we test for vacuum loss. And why is that important? Because then there is bacterial formation that can happen it is aerobic. So therefore, presence of air means there is bacterial content that will develop and so on, right? So the packaging has more than a brand value for us. It is what delivers that meat in that perfect quality that you enjoy in your dinner table or your lunch table and so on. But on the branding side as well, I think people have really liked that, right?
Yeah, true.
So we've had customers sort of photos on the packaging as well. They love it. Every time I meet some folks at some parties or get together, they're always asking, "Hey, how can I get my photo onto the brand?" Just imagine that. I mean, India, there was a place and time where you wouldn't want to be seen.
Correct.
at a
Wow.
meat store to a time where people are saying, you know what, get my photo on the box.
Wow.
Because I think you stand for quality, you stand for, and I want to be associated with that.
Sure.
I think that's a big shift that
It's a
Licious has
huge
brought
leap.
about for this industry.
True.
And hopefully we can carry this forward, and we want to make it so. I mean, our dream is to actually make it the biggest meat brand of the world.
Right.
Starting with India, of course, first.
Sure.
But yeah, I think.
No, I really love the part where you're saying that it's such a huge change of face, right? I mean, you're thinking of meat as something that you don't want to be associated with, and suddenly you want your face on it. So I think it's a huge thing. Congratulations to all of you for what you've done with the whole thing. So I know this is going to be a tricky question, but I'm still going to ask it. I know this is huge, complicated. There's a shelf life for 3 days. I know you guys are trying to do everything as much as possible. But what is your prediction as a tech and product leader? In this industry, D2C is different. So I want you to tell me, what do you see from a tech perspective that could be a shift?
So I think the first thing, a few things that are going to shift in the D2C world. I'll tell you my way of looking at what are the foundation pieces that needs to enable the shift to happen.
Okay.
The first and foremost would be, I think, omnichannel commerce. It's been talked about for a while, but there are very few players actually who do this well, right? Probably very, 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 very few, right? And that is going to be a key lever of the future for D2C. So you have to think of this as a way that D2C brands need to be at the points of consumption where consumers are, right? So that means that different markets, different channels will mean a lot for D2C brands, right? So offline will play a big role, and it does in meat specifically. But then I need to make sure that the product synergies between online and offline is extremely strong. The consumer journeys are the same, and so on.
Seamless.
So that is going to be a big area of investment, not just talk in terms of how do you get this done on the ground. That's hard. That would be one big change. The second thing that I see is what I call the supply chain, I don't know, plus.
Okay, right? Supply chain plus.
Yeah, there is always a talk about supply chain 3.0, 4.0. I don't know what number it is right now, but I'll just say there is a plus to anything that you can imagine. This whole thing about real-time inventory rebalancing, prediction, demand prediction, etc. All of this needs to fit in together. Today, demand prediction tends to be a different technology module.
Okay.
Production planning tends to be a different technology module. Inventory management tends to be something entirely different. These things need to play together, and that synergies will start to play out in the next few years, and hopefully we can lead some of those thought processes and innovations. But this whole dynamic movement of inventory and rebalancing is going to be so critical for D2C brands, and especially in the fresh industry like us, for this to play out well, right? So that will be the second one. The third, I believe, would be, CX or, customer support and, consumer connect directions will change to be more automated, to be more driven through technology. You've always heard about chatbots coming into play and all of that. I think it's very near to that.
Okay.
If you look at the some of the recent Gen AI models, they can be tuned pretty well to answer very, very specific questions. The day won't be far when you add voice to it, even linguistic support to it. You almost make robotic processes for this, right? So that's going to be a big thing. And lastly, I believe all of this needs to be held together. For D2C, it's a consumer plus the supply chain. So running control towers across this to make sure that what is happening where, etc. Full visibility of your business needs to be looked at. So that will be another technological layer that will see a lot of evolution. You'll see a lot of players coming into this field. Marketing innovations. I think the days of TV ad led
correct
marketing, I think will shift more towards word of mouth, influencer, you and I, marketing products and so on. So you can see a lot of shift that will change. It's not a technology thing, but I think these are trends that will evolve in the D2C space.
Sure.
And to power all of this, it's going to be AI and data.
Right.
These are going to be our foundations. And I think there is not enough being said about AI. We always talk about AI as a technology innovation, but mainstream application of this in all of these, you know, elements that I spoke about is going to get very, very prevalent in the next few years.
Interesting.
So this is what I see as shifts.
Interesting, very interesting. So I think I love the part that you've said that AI and Gen AI. I'm quite excited to see that if I'm ordering from Licious and then, there's a robotic voice which saying that what I can order today. But yeah, it'll be fun to see what happens. So just moving along and making this a little more fun conversation. I know I made it like really serious throughout the whole thing. So you've been a part of a band. You've been a lead guitarist. Am I right, Ajit? You've done some gigs even while you were at Myntra. Yeah. So do you want to talk to us about what got you into, being a guitarist? What led you towards music?
Okay. All right. I thought that was a past life, but picking up guitar is like anybody else in college. When you have a lot of free time, you don't know what to do. Music has been my passion from my school. So
okay.
I said, okay, not just listen, let me also play. So I picked up guitar to learn a few things. In college, yes, I used to play with a band in college. I used to play the lead guitar then. And out of college, the same college mates continued from different bands, but of course we came together as one band.
Wow.
I switched to playing bass in shows, but at home I still used to play my usual guitar. So we were together probably close to 15 years, playing as a band, doing gigs. All of that we did. It was for us, for all of us who used to be, who still are working, much like me in other corporations and so on. This was a big sort of let your steam out kind of a thing, right? So get together the weekends, play a few songs, then find the next possible gig where all of us were free, do that gig, get back to our work. So it was a huge, let's say, platform for just letting ourselves be.
Right.
It was therapeutic in many ways.
Sure.
So we continued to do that for many years. Then I think all of us got busy with our own lives, and some of us moved out of India, and we said, all right, instead of now taking the pain of forming another band, let's just call it a day.
Okay.
So we stopped playing for the last 3-4 years, but in our homes, we still continue to play music. We still get together as a band of brothers and still talk about music and all of that. We do that. So, I think it is important for people to have some passion beyond this work.
True.
It helps. Of course, being in a band teaches you a lot of different dynamics as well, how to work in a group, how to have differences, but still on the day of the show, then how do you remain tight as, that nobody sees a mistake that each of you make, and we are making mistakes all the time, but you tend to cover up mistakes of one another, and that's beautiful, I think.
I was going to actually bring that up, Ajit, because you were a lead guitarist, you were okay to be a bass guitarist, and it shows. Also, there are a few things as a leadership style that emerges, and since we've known each other for a while, I think you are able to play the lead. Sometimes you're able to sidestep and let someone take the show. Most often or not, I've seen that leaders don't want to take the sidestep, but with you, I've seen that, you're able to push your team forward. You're able to tell them to go forward and do things. I've seen that in your journey in Myntra or even with M-Fine. You're very passionate about what you do. So you keep everything tight, together. So even with Licious, it's, while you were discussing the whole thing, it sounded like you formed the whole company, right? If I'm allowed to say it, I hope don't get beaten up by Vivek and Abhay, but yeah.
Hopefully
so
not.
Do you look for these traits when you're hiring your senior engineering teams? Do you see some of these? Do you look for them? Or what are your go-to items when you're actually hiring people?
Yeah, I think, it is important
It is
to look
important.
for this. I think the first and foremost thing when hiring somebody senior, and this is not necessarily in technology, is to see that there is solid, technical backing and the understanding of the domain that the person is in, whether it is finance, whether it is technology, whether it is growth, marketing, whatever else it might be. Are you deeply proficient in the core skill that you possess, right? So that is absolutely important. It's almost like table stakes. The second thing is a deep understanding of business and consumer. And this is especially true for technology.
Okay.
Right? Often technology leaders tend to sort of be either purely technology focused or tend to be product focused, but not necessarily business focused. I think this is important. If everybody in the senior leadership team is not looking at the business the same way, then a lot of time needs to be spent in bringing minds together and getting them onto the same page, as they call it, right? You have to be in the same page by understanding business, not because somebody is telling you to do so. So that is an important trait that I look for. How deeply do you understand business and consumers for you to actually see what is the technology pieces or whatever you need to do in finance or wherever else to actually aid that business? This will be a second thing. The third is what I would say adaptability. And this is somewhat in that thing of when do you step forward, when do you step back, etc. I think assuming that you will be in the driver's seat at all the times and you have to be the driving, we all like to do it, of course, right? There is no,
true.
You'll be lying if you say we didn't enjoy that. But there are times when you have to step aside and let somebody else take the wheels and so on. So you got to be adaptable, not only just in terms of environment, but also that business is changing and therefore you need to change your thinking as well. So, and associated with this is the ability to learn, right? As leaders, we generally don't like to accept that we don't know everything, right?
Correct.
The reality is we don't know. There's a saying that we often know far less than what we think we know. And it is so true. And accepting that and showing the willingness to sort of learn, either from your peers or your team as well. They have a lot of things to teach you. Or other industry leaders is an important aspect. So these are some of the things that I look for beyond just the core ability itself. This is absolutely essential. And of course, if somebody's played sports, somebody's done, something as a team, then that also speaks a lot about that person's leadership abilities or being a team player, being able to collaborate, because it's so important as a leader. You can't get anything done by yourself. I think the moment you left your individual contributor realm, there is practically nothing you can do yourself.
Correct.
Right? So understanding that is essential. So some of these, I would say evidences sort of give you insights into what that person is. So it's not a prerequisite. It's not like, you have to play a team sport for you to be hired. It's not that. But the point is, if somebody's done it, they understand those dynamics, and that makes it easier for the person to succeed. So we look at these elements.
Excellent. So I'm just going to push the pedal on the last piece that you mentioned, right? So I'm certain that you saw tough times during COVID. Every organization did. There's a lot of uncertainty, ambiguity, and then there is this funding winter that's cropped up. So during this, and everyone's competing, not against one another, but I would say that competing for profitability, competing to put themselves out there. So what do you see as, the mantra for technology leaders to be successful in this era? What would be your thoughts?
So for me, there are, again, a few elements that are extremely important. The first one would be a deep understanding of business.
Okay.
Very deep understanding of business. I think it is understated. Often, you hear things like, technology is supposed to drive business and all of that. It almost seems like you have to do business a favor by doing that. But you have to be business backward. And technology leaders need to understand this. All of us love our technology pieces and to build. We are all builders. We are engineers first.
Correct.
While we get all of that, I think it is important to discard that and start looking at business and say, what is important for that to happen? Right? So the way you look at build, buy, don't do, right? It's interesting, but let's not do it. Right?
Sure.
It's very important for a leader to sort of adapt to that. So this will be one very, very important piece. The second is, I think we talked about adaptability and learning. Business dynamics change very rapidly.
Correct.
Faster than you can imagine. There is a competitor suddenly who's popped up out of nowhere. They are challenging the existing business models, and they will hit you, right? And they will be faster than you because you, at some point, you are larger than somebody who's small. Who's just starting up, right? So they have the agility that you don't have. So therefore, they will be able to move quickly. And if you're not watchful of that, then your business is done. So being able to adapt very quickly and change directions is a very, very important thing. I think assuming that here is a roadmap that is going to stay stable for 1 year, I think is not the right way to look at it. I've seen a lot of leaders expecting that, and they see rapid changes as a problem as opposed to an opportunity. I think that is a second big element. And the third, in my view, would be your ability to learn. Right, unlearn and learn is going to be quite frequent in your life as a technology leader. What you know today may not be relevant tomorrow. Right? Absolutely relevant things. Whatever I picked up in some of my early stages of my career are absolutely useless right now. Absolutely.
Sure.
So if you don't keep learning, adapting, I think there is a shelf life that people will hit, and that is I would say the third big element for somebody to be extremely successful. So for me, these are a few things that people need to keep in mind.
Very nice. I'm going to take that.
One more thing.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
You've got to have extreme amount of grit and resilience. I think this
Sure.
Because business changes so rapidly. Failure is going to be common.
Absolutely.
So if you're going to be hurt by the first failure that you see, then you will not succeed. You've got to keep trying and trying and trying. And there will be some point where if your inputs are right, it should work, right? So not giving up should be probably even a thing they should teach in colleges. I don't know. But it is so, we have to underline that. I think it is so critical, especially when you start to assume leadership positions, or if you're going to be a founder yourself at some point, you will feel that you're hitting the road block every day. And you know yourself as well, being a founder, that those questions are going to come hard at you every single day, right? Will we exist? Will we not exist? Will we exist? Will we not exist? And I think going through that, getting through that is so critical. So yeah.
Sure. No, thank you so much for that. The point number 2 is something I'm going to take home, where you spoke about there could be competition that will hit you in your face, and you need to be prepared, need to look forward, right? So I'm going to take that home as a lesson for myself. So before we wind up the show, any parting thoughts, Ajit? Would you like to give any piece of advice to young engineers, or talk to groups of technologists who want to be at your level? Anything that you'd like to share?
I don't know if there is a mantra or anything of that sort, but okay. I think to engineers, I think a lot of engineers today are extremely smart. They're quick on their feet. They learn technology. They already come with a lot of understanding of technology, and it's good to see a lot of people who are just fresh after graduation, getting into the depths of things, wanting to understand how things work and move ahead.
Correct.
So I would only say, one, be extremely curious. Try to figure out how things work, why they work the way it is. Challenge some of those assumptions that people are making. Many a times, a lot of people are wrong, and they don't know, right? So being extremely curious is absolutely important. To understand the business landscape as well. As early as you pick up in your career, I think the more chances of you becoming a solid leader will emerge, right? So while it might seem boring, or it might seem, this is not my domain, etc., it is your domain. In the future, the lines between business, product, technology, all of this is going to fade away, because it's going to all be solution oriented.
Correct.
A lot of core technology frameworks are going to take away the pain of building everything yourself. Right now, a lot of people use ChatGPT to do basic things. Right, I can do debugging, quite easily, and so on. basic analysis I don't need to ask anybody. I can do it myself because, it helps you at least 30-40% of the way, and the rest of it you can do. So own the solution mindset as opposed to saying I will only do technology and all of that. So understand the business, think of solutions, be extremely curious. This is it.
Wow,
I think it is.
nice.
It's quite simple.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much, Ajit, for this lovely chat. I really am going to take a few things back home as well, like I told you. So thank you so much for being on our show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right.
It's a pleasure.